Week 4 is here, and week 3, a lot of you had a good day because of my rankings, and a lot of you might have had a bad day, a very bad day, a horrible day. I messed up a few times. I did good a few times. Comes with the job, all right? Get used to it. But for those of you who were here last week, I shouted out a dinosaur last time because Nick got me a dinosaur. I don't know why, but he got me a new one. I don't know if you guys could see that. I might be able to see it a little bit better with my hand being in the background. You guys might be able to see it a little bit better if I put my hand behind it. I know it's a kid's toy. Nick got it for me. I don't know. I'll just show appreciation week in and week out. For those of you who are new to the channel, make sure to like, make sure to sub. If you're new, you're probably also scared. Like, what happened to fantasy football? There's this kid talking to me in an X-Men jacket and about a dinosaur. Let's get into football. So let's do it. Let's cook. Week 4 rankings. Here they are. Get into our running backs right away. So one of the things I messed up on last week was Josh Jacobs. I thought he'd have a killer week against the Steelers. He didn't. He's been mid all season. So what am I going to do? Am I going to finally give up on him? Nope. I have him 2 spots higher than the consensus rankings because I'm not backing down. I usually don't talk about my top 5 guys because I usually feel like I don't need to hold your hand through it, but Josh Jacobs, I understand there's going to be some pushback on him. So my thought process to have him as a top 5, top 4 back to be exact. The LA Chargers, the matchup. The Raiders and Chargers the past few years have been in a brawl, and right now the Chargers are allowing on average 20.3 fantasy points a game to running backs, and Josh Jacobs in his last 3 games versus the Chargers has averaged a good amount. Not 70, not 80, over 100 yards a game, 111 to be exact in the past 3 times he's played LA. That's a pretty good mark. I'm going to trust him. I'm going to trust the process, and I'm going to trust the Chargers defense to let him cook because they can't stop anyone. Moving on. One of the guys I really need to address right away is James Conner. I have him very high up. And in fact, I have him 10 spots higher than the consensus rankings. And my reason being is because he's the RB8 on the season. As much as I think the Cardinals are dog shit, as much as I think every team they play is going to pummel them, James Conner is the RB8 on the season. All right. That deserves respect. There's only so much of which I could discredit a guy when he continues to put up numbers and be a top 10 play, and he's got a tough matchup against the Niners this week. But if you look at just the Niners as far as how they do in fantasy points for running backs, they are below average. They're in the bottom 16 in the league. They're not in the top 16. Now, if you wanted to take it outside of fantasy football, this is a stud defense, but we're not here for X's and O's. We're here from W's and L's in fantasy football. And James Conner this week deserves a top 12 spot. After that, I will also admit I've been messing up on DeAndre Swift. The dude's been cooking for over 100 yards on the ground 2 games in a row. Do I think that's sustainable? No. Am I still concerned of his long-term output because of the tush push? Every goal line carry is going to go to Hurts and not a running back? Yes. The dude has clearly in the right spot to where he is efficient enough to deserve RB2 respect. So that is me admitting defeat, waving the white flag. He's RB2. He's worthy of being in your lineup this week. Right behind him, Alvin Kamara. I almost put Kamara over Swift, and I'm like, all right, let's pump the brakes, Jameson. It might be a little too early to give a guy top 15 respect heading into the week. We drafted Alvin Kamara for a reason. He's a beast, especially if we're, this is for half PPR rankings, but if you're in a PPR league, this is why you draft him. That's when he is a top 15 back already. And Jamal Williams is out. Yes, Alvin Kamara might need some time to come in, might have a little bit of rust, and I'm not as big of a fan of him as I would be if Derek Carr was playing. I think that would help his receiving game, but you still drafted him in the early 6th, 7th, 8th round. Maybe you reached on him here and there for this reason to play him as an RB2 or better. So that's where I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Zack Moss. I've been disrespecting him. I've been putting him outside the top 24 running backs. I've been putting him in you could throw him in your flex. I probably wouldn't. And I've been wrong. The dude's been killing it. And I don't love his matchup versus the Rams. I feel like he's been overperforming a little bit. But with Anthony Richardson being back on the scene, I'm really excited to see this rushing offense 100% together. There's no JT in the building still, but AR hasn't played a full game with Zack Moss, and Moss hasn't played a full game with AR. And these two have been killing it solo dolo against a Rams team that is clearly beatable. Even though they started hot, they are 1-2. Maybe the Colts can run up some points on them, or at least can Zack Moss get in the end zone and keep your fantasy team afloat. After that, Dameon Pierce. This is a guy I have been high on, and he finally delivered last week. We got a little help from him getting in the end zone. I'll admit that there, and somehow the Texans popping on the scene and beating the shit out of the Jaguars. I don't know if any of us saw that, but he did it. He was a part of it. Might have been a little bit helpful to Tank Dell. but Dameon Pierce got his as well. And now he goes to face the Steelers, who's given up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs this season. So let the kid do his thing. I'm still keeping him in the top 20, given the matchup and given what he did last week. Clearly, he is finally capable of getting in the end zone. And this Texans offense, I know their O-line is brutal, and that's kind of the most crucial piece for an offense sometimes, especially the ground game. But clearly, they are capable of moving the ball without it and able to scrape by without a great O-line. Like I said, given the matchup, 4th most fantasy points, I'm going to take that all day. I'm definitely starting him as an RB2. One guy I do want to talk about, even though this is right where the experts have him, Javonte Williams. This is a guy I would even recommend buying low on. You know, this isn't a buy low video. This is a rankings video, but I like Javonte a lot. He's gotten more and more touches every single week, and I think he could have had a good day versus the Dolphins if that didn't just turn into a disaster class. But now he gets to face the Chicago Bears, who couldn't be more down bad right now. And the Bears give up the 2nd most fantasy points to running backs. To let Javonte do his thing. Next up, Achane. Look, you guys either drafted him and stashed him for this day, or you spent everything you could on waiver wire to go out and get him. And I don't think you spent all that to not give him a shot after his 50-point week. Now, if you're expecting him to even put up 30-point game, you're going to be a little too rich in optimism. I think this is still Raheem Mostert's job for the time being, but clearly this backfield is fully capable of supporting 2 well-rounded fantasy backs. I'm still a little hesitant. Clearly, he's not in my top 24, but when a dude puts up RB1 week and not even just like, oh, he had a good day, it's like, no, he had the best day possibly we'll see all season for running backs. I'm not fading him by any means. 2 guys I'm low on that are big names, Najee Harris and Breece Hall. These guys, look, they're in the top 30, so if you're desperate, if you're thin, obviously you're still starting them or you're still giving them a shot, but I'm just not liking what I'm seeing. Like, Najee, you could convince yourself in the matchup it's Houston. He's still a big back. He'll probably get the goal line carry, but he just doesn't look good. This is one of those times where you do step away from fantasy and you just watch him and you're like, this is not a good running back. And that is really hard for me to get behind. I don't even he just has done nothing to convince us he was worth that 3rd, 4th, whatever round value of which you got him in, whether you're even lucky and he slipped to a late 4 or you're stupid and you convince yourself he's going to be worth an early 3. It's unfortunate. But I just, until I see otherwise, as I see Jaylen Warren looking better and better than Najee, I can't be sold on him. I'm not starting him if I have him unless I'm really, really desperate. Breece Hall, same thing. He has not done anything we've wanted since week 1. You'll see in my wide receivers, I'm not high on the Jets offense now with Zack Wilson. Outside of week 1 in his big, I don't even call it a fluke, his good game of over 100 scrimmage yards, well over, he's done literally nothing. And I mean nothing. And now he goes to play the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a crazy underrated defense right now. So crazy that they allow the 4th least fantasy points to running backs. Chiefs are going to run up the score. The Jets are going to have to abandon the run game within 4 minutes. Zach Wilson's just going to be getting pressured, sacked, and throwing for his life. I mean, he's putting up yards, but he's just going to be dropping back for his life. And unfortunately, Breece Hall's not going to get his. Enough running back talk. On to the wide receivers. What do we got cooking? Wide receivers, the first one I want to talk about is Spotlight Man of the Year, Puka Nacua. I have Puka a little high compared to the experts. They have him just outside the top 10. I think he deserves to be in there. And the reason is, even after his cold game, I think I like him even more because that's the point. Puka Nacua is coming off of a 5-reception, 72-yard game, and we're calling that cold. Like, once a wide receiver hits that status where he has 5 receptions and 70 yards, and we're like, oh, that's a bad day, you've officially hit that upper echelon. And until Cooper Kupp comes back, Puka's in that upper echelon, and I'm not taking him out of there. Like, the Rams underperformed last week, and he was still an okay option. Like, he didn't do what you wanted in the first 2 weeks because those expectations were through the roof. It's not like he put up an absolute dud either. Like, after that, Jaylen Waddle, the elephant in the room, he on my list is about 6 spots higher than the consensus rankings. And I understand you have not seen much out of Waddle to be satisfied with your 2nd round draft capital that you probably spent on him. But I promise you the talent and execution is there. Jaylen Waddle is averaging over 20 yards per reception. That is the 2nd most in the league amongst qualified wide receivers. That's more than Tyreek Hill's own teammate. The volume just isn't there. In game 3, he missed. You're telling me he wouldn't have been part of that 70-point game? And I can if and but, shoulda, coulda, woulda all day. That's the type of offense he's in. They could put up 70 points without him. The days where he's on, he is going to pay dividends and be worth your draft capital. Trust me. Do not lose faith just yet. And I do think the volume will get there. Jaylen Waddle averaged almost 7 targets per game last year. That was with Tyreek Hill. That was with Mike McDaniels. This year, he's only averaging 4 per each game. That's too big of a drop-off to be sustainable. Positive regression will occur. Waddle will be just fine. Do not panic. But the one guy I do want to talk about is CeeDee Lamb. I know I'm talking about a lot of the top Gs. Let's make this clear. These top Gs, CeeDee Lamb, Waddle, you're going to start them no matter what. Whether I talk bad about them, good about them, they're wide receiver ones no matter what. I'm just being a little nitpicky as far as they might be slightly overrated, underrated. I'm trying to throw a little bit of value in there for you to understand how good I think these guys are the rest of the way rather than just week 4. These are week 4 rankings. I'm just spinning a little game out there so you know what you got yourself into the rest of the season. CeeDee Lamb might be a fraud. Again, he's a wide receiver 1. I just addressed that. But he has had one finish inside the top 10 this year. And to be exact, it was number 10, all right? Every single week, I see fantasy football experts rank him as a top 8, top 7, top 6, top 5 start. And I get it. He's CeeDee Lamb. He is in that upper echelon of the league. But we haven't really seen it this year so far. So I'm just going to pump the brakes a little bit. I'm not going to just give him his golden crown because he's CeeDee Lamb and he's part of the Cowboys. Mike Evans this week has taken a big drop off. And it's mainly because the Saints. He is not the best against the Saints. He's played the Saints 17 times in his career. It's a division rival. He's played them a lot. He's gone over 80 yards only 3 times. And I know Mike Evans is never the guy to just pop off for like, oh, Mike Evans had 104 today. That's about normal. No. If he gets 100, that's like an amazing day for Mike Evans. But still, 80's like achievable. He's a deep threat guy. But on top of the yards, in those 17 games, and only 5 of them he scored. Like, this is a tough matchup. The Saints play him tough. Him and Marshawn Lattimore got beef. They're always chirping at each other, and Lattimore does a good job of containing them. Still a start, still a wide receiver 2 easily, but do not expect this, top 5 production that he's been putting up so far through the first 2 weeks where he's scoring every single freaking game. Another guy, though, that I am high on right below Mikey Evans is Zay Flowers. Zay's like almost the opposite of Jaylen Waddle. He's getting all the volume in the world. The efficiency just isn't there yet. He's not getting 20 yards per reception, but he is that type of special player, and he's getting the workload to be the wide receiver 1 on this team. He's got 2 games with 10 targets. So they're giving him the work, and I think Cleveland is a tough matchup, but that's why I'm not putting him in the top 15. I think he's a top 25 wide receiver, top 24. He's a wide receiver 2 that I'm absolutely starting, and I really like this week. Almost last, but almost not least, is the Houston Texans. Both these boys deserve to be in your starting lineup. They've proved it, kind of like I talked about Pierce earlier. This Texans offense is low-key underrated. They can move the ball. They're doing their thing. They're both top 15 on the season. CJ Stroud's low-key nice with it, and the Steelers allowed the 5th most fantasy points to wideouts this season. That's a lot of good numbers, equations, calculating that equal start for me. But finally, I continue to be low on the Jets' weapons. I have Garrett Wilson 10 spots below the experts, and I just can't come up from that. Chris Jones is going to eat Zack Wilson alive. And Garrett Wilson right now, I feel like his numbers are slightly inflated because of the 2 touchdowns he scored in the first 2 weeks. That's not really sustainable with this offense to just expect him to score. Week 1, he had one of the craziest catches I've ever seen. In week 2, he got through on a broken play. And I get things happen with the special player. He gets through on broken plays. He makes big plays. He makes big catches. But against the Kansas City Chiefs, who have allowed the 5th least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers, who's going to run up the score on the Jets' ass, I would seriously consider benching Garrett Wilson this week, depending on your situation. You see, I have him outside the top 30, barely making this list. I get if you're in a situation where you need to start him, go for it. That's why he's still respected and at least on the list. But you got a team you're confident with, don't just throw Garrett Wilson in there because his name's Garrett Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all she wrote. Let me know what you want to see next time. As always, and of course, again, shout out to the dinosaur that Nick got me. This is Dexter, the dinosaur. The green one you saw last episode was Doug, the dinosaur. If anything changes in my rankings between now and game time, you could go to BDGE.co and find the updated rankings down to every last minute, second moment right there, right now. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, of course, thank you and good night.